Our culture at Great Hearts is student-centered. So whatever that student needs, they're gonna get. Absolutely. What do we have now? Cram. Very good.
We've got 4 kids currently going to a Great Hearts school, and we've got 1 child in the ESS program today.
He had been previously going to a public school, and though he was working with a lot of great, wonderful people that were trying to help him progress, he struggled with knowing letters and things like that.
A year had gone by, and he couldn't get through the letter F in the alphabet. So he joined our other kids at the Great Hearts School, and within 2 months he was reading.
Great Hearts does special education much differently. So instead of putting our special education kids in a separate classroom, they are actually with their regular peers almost all day.
I think that it benefits everyone, both sides. The typical students develop a sense of compassion, and then the students with special needs have the opportunity to be a part of just an absolutely beautiful curriculum, wonderful student body and community.
We try to be the least invasive as possible because we really want them to feel like everyone else.
If you have experiences with other schools, a lot of times they try to lower the standard as much as possible so everyone can step over it. And Great Hearts doesn't do that.
I was concerned that this might be too rigorous, but what I found was the exact opposite. They met him exactly where he was at. He's never come home discouraged. He's so engaged with how they're teaching him.
Let's try to change when to what.
There's a lot of focus on what does that child need and how can we achieve that. We really want to get more modalities than just looking at a word and dissecting it. We want to get their hands involved. We want to get them involved as creatively as possible.
When we were working on number line, rather than just using a 2-dimensional piece of paper with a number line, we got out in the hallway and marked the tiles ourselves with the numbers and practiced moving up, which means more, and then back, which means less. It sticks with them and they remember it forever. I think they'll tell their kids someday that they learn to count and they learn to add, jumping down the tiles of their school hallway.
The favorite part of my job is seeing a kid that, I've had since, 1st or 2nd grade, and they did not know how to read. And then all of a sudden they're in 3rd grade, 4th grade, and they're reading Wizard of Oz. And you're like, oh my gosh, like that's incredible and amazing. And I did that with them.
Just seeing the light bulb go on in general, and hearing the Mrs. Marks, I got it.
Just to see them grow and be just like their peers is so rewarding and really the best part of my job, for sure.
Everyone came around our son to tell me how much they were here to support him. And I, multiple times, would leave with tears in my eyes, completely choked up, because I could see the love and the care that our son was gonna get, and it just calmed my fears and my anxieties over, the future for him and will he be able to catch up. And what I found is he made leaps and bounds in his learning because of that support. It was incredible.
Hello, Great Hearts Harveston community. Welcome to our virtual info session, our virtual info night on student support services. I'm Samuel Heisman. I'm the head of school at Great Hearts Harveston, and I can't wait to jump into this topic. It's near and dear to my heart as an educator and as a parent. So as you know, our mission is to cultivate the minds and hearts of our students through the pursuit of truth, goodness, and beauty. We want all students to think deeply, love noble things, and live well together. All students, no exceptions. Any and every student. We believe in the life-changing power of this program, and we also believe that any and every student deserves access to it. Truly, we believe this is the best education that can be offered, and if it's the best for some, it ought to be the best for all students. We hope to remove barriers, provide support, and offer interventions whenever necessary in support of our students' flourishing. So to that end, what I'd like to do in order to introduce to you our Student Support Services, and to introduce two of my colleagues from Great Hearts America who will help articulate and give shape to our student support program. The first one is Heather Washburn. Mrs. Heather Washburn, our Vice President of Academic Achievement and Accessibility. Heather, could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yes, and it's so good to be here tonight with you, Sam. I was out in December, and hopefully some of the families who were at that event are here tonight to hear more about our program to support all students as they access our curriculum. As Sam said, I'm Vice President of Academic Achievement and Accessibility for Great Hearts America. Prior to coming into this position this year, I was a founding headmaster of a lower school in Goodyear, Arizona, and I also led our flagship school, Veritas Preparatory Academy, for 3 years. My experience with Great Hearts has led me down a path of understanding student needs and to develop tiered support for students so that we can ensure that they can become a part and continue to be a part of a Great Hearts education. The Bailey family was one of my families at Veritas, and their story is not dissimilar to many family stories, my own included. I have 3 children who graduated from Great Hearts Academies, and one of them was found in need of specially designed instruction for mathematics. She went through several years of struggling and finally was evaluated and identified for special education services, and now today is engaging as a nursing student at Grand Canyon University, where mathematics is a central piece of that education. And because of the support that she received throughout her time with Great Hearts, she gained the confidence to advocate for herself and to engage with teachers because they were approachable, and because she had the support of the special education team at her academy to learn how to use the adaptive skills they were providing her and engage in learning. So I know this from a very personal experience with my own children, that this education is rigorous, it's robust, and we are truly committed to ensuring that all students have access. As a head of school, I learned to develop a very tiered approach to ensure that students were being served, all students were being served, and we will talk through some of that structure in a few moments. I want to now turn it over to Mr. Heisman so that he can introduce one of our other colleagues.
Very good. Thank you, Heather. Thank you for sharing your personal passion and professional passion for the topic. I'd like to bring somebody who has both of those, personal and professional passion for support services for students. My good friend, Mr. Tom Dobler, our Senior National Director of Exceptional Student Services. Tom, good to see you. Could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Great to be here, Sam. Hi, Harveston families. My name is Tom Dobler, and as Sam said, I'm the Senior National Director of Exceptional Student Services. I've been a special education teacher, or consider myself a special education teacher or leader in this field for about 19 years now. And for 16 of those years, I've been with Great Hearts. So you could say that I really grew up with this organization. I started as one of their first ESS coordinators and helped really set the vision for the work we do and how we think about serving students with disabilities and how we individualize our programs to meet students' needs and give them access to our curriculum. So I'm excited to talk to you guys about that, and I will in a minute. But I would like to hand you all back to Heather Washburn now, because she's going to take you through student supports and interventions that happen before a student goes to either special education or Section 504. Thanks, Heather.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. As Tom said, we're going to talk tonight about intervention programs, services for students with disabilities. Our next slide, we'll go back to that core purpose that head of school Heisman mentioned, which is the cultivation. So even in that word, we've chosen something that's natural, that's human. We cultivate life, to cultivate the hearts and minds of our students through the pursuit of truth, goodness, and beauty. And the next slide, we'll start to walk through the intervention framework that's in place at our academies in Arizona, in Texas, and that will be in place in Harveston. Then, as you think about student needs, there are multi-tiers of support that we found that students need to be able to grow as Great Hearts students. And we do believe that the best education is the best education for all. And we believe that best education is a classical liberal arts education because it is humane, it is philosophical, and it is just. And the next slide will introduce the idea of intervention. So if you think of to intervene, it means to come between so as to prevent or to alter a result or course of events. So to intervene, honestly, we do it on a daily basis. So your child has brushed their teeth. You're not quite sure that they did it really well. You step in, you intervene, and you teach them how to brush their teeth. So when we think about intervening, on a daily basis, we're intervening in the lives of our children. And as teachers, we're intervening in the lives of our students to ensure that they are gaining the skills and knowledge essential for their growth and their human formation so that they can gain the skills of a lifelong learner. And the next slide, we'll present and you'll see some key elements of our curriculum. You'll see primary math, which is Singapore math, well-ordered language, Charlotte's Web, the books of Narnia, and then the core knowledge, history, and science scope and sequence. All of these, plus so much more, are part of our curriculum. And when we think about intervention as Great Hearts teachers, we think of it in the sense that we want to ensure that all students, and when we say all, we truly mean all students, are provided with the skills and knowledge they need to access the rich cream of our curriculum and the experience of being in a Great Hearts classroom. One of the other texts that we read as Great Hearts schools in 7th grade is The Miracle Worker. And if you think about the Miracle Worker, you can understand that we do care deeply about the students that we serve. With the life of Helen Keller, students learn how Anne Sullivan came in and walked alongside her to ensure that Helen had the experience and the knowledge she needed to grow and to learn how to speak and to read and later on to write. So that's a text that's central to our curriculum. In the next slide, we'll talk about the tiers. So if you think about the tiers, intervention for us starts in the classroom. As you heard in the video, we believe in a push-in model for all of the support that we give to students. So that could be an intervention in the classroom where one of our teaching assistants, because we do have that model in our lower school, where we have a lead teacher and a teaching assistant in each one of our classrooms. And that teaching assistant is there to support students as the teacher teaches at a rigorous level to ensure that students are being challenged as well as supported throughout their time with us. And so the intervention in the classroom is there so that students have that support and there is that rigor. Of course, what is that first tier? In the next slide, we'll see it's excellent teaching. When I talk about excellent teaching, our model is a Socratic model, meaning that we use questions to guide students to understanding. We believe that students are the primary cause of learning and that teachers are to set the conditions for students to be able to learn in the classroom. That primary cause of learning means that students have to be actively engaged in learning. And so you'll see in even these images, students are raising their hand, they're showing their whiteboard, they're at the board. The teacher is engaging them in learning because we know that that is the way which all of us learn, is through active engagement in the activity we are participating in. Excellent teaching then means that teachers are checking for understanding, that they're guiding the students through questions to clarity, and they're giving them opportunity to work on the skills that they need to gain in order to move forward with their educational opportunity. The next slide then will lead us into the idea of coaching. So if you understand athletics, you'll understand that coaches are always looking at the particular skills that students need to gain or the athletes need to gain in order to improve. In our model of education, there are questions that guide, and then teachers are also coaching students, walking alongside of them to help them gain those skills and that knowledge. They will have individual conversations at different points as students are working on independent practice in a classroom. They will also have students at the board guiding them through questions as they then model or demonstrate the activity of the classroom for fellow classmates. Teachers in our model are always desirous to build relationship with their students. And it is only through relationship that we can actually educate children. And so this is one of the key tiers of the multi-tiered student intervention program, is the idea of coaching and developing the skills that students need, both as a whole classroom and then as individual learners. The next slide will walk us through then the idea of tiered or targeted intervention. So targeted intervention, it takes place in multiple ways. Targeted intervention might be in a classroom setting where certain skills have been identified through classroom assessments that students need to understand. And so there might be a time where teaching assistants might pull a small group of students to the side and help to develop their understanding in a particular way in a particular subject area, while the rest of the class is engaging in an independent practice activity. They also might sit with students as those same students are engaging with the teacher at the front of the classroom, just making sure that those students are following along and experiencing what they should as the teacher is teaching. The other way targeted intervention is put into place at our academies is through benchmark assessments. So at the beginning of the year, we have assessments that we give to our students. They might be assessments in M-Class or DIBELS, which is used to identify students with disabilities or other reading challenges. And so those students are tested at the beginning of the year. Their assessments are used to then understand what support those students need. And if there is a need for intervention, students are then placed into reading levels, and we have reading interventionists and then pull those students to guide them through a particularly targeted, that's why we use that word, reading intervention program that identifies their specific needs and guides them through those needs in order to gain the knowledge and skills they need to begin to read fluently and with comprehension. We also have mathematics benchmark tools that we use to identify students with gaps in mathematics. And we also will have a math interventionist who is working with the homeroom teacher to make sure that at times that interventionist is pushing into the classroom to support math instruction, and at times pulling small groups of students out to work on particular skills. So targeted intervention is in place to make sure that if the intervention or the instruction of the classroom is not quite meeting all of the needs of the students, that the students then have an opportunity to sit with a interventionist or even a teaching assistant or a teacher who's been trained and developed in the intervention program to meet the needs of those students. And then we have an intensive progress monitoring process. So as students are progressing through the intervention, they are also then we are gaining an understanding of their progress and can then even more closely target those needs and fill in those gaps. And as students progress, we're able to move them on either through an additional level of intervention or remove intervention for a time to see if they have the gaps they needed filled and can just continue in the classroom experience, or if they need to continue with targeted intervention. The next slide will talk through a little bit about if they're not responding to intervention. So if a student does not respond to the tiered intervention, right, the classroom, the first tier, which is the classroom instruction, the second tier, which is the targeted instruction intervention program, if they're not responding to those, we refer our students then to the student support team, or in Louisiana, it's called Student Building Level Committee. And the members of the student support team would be the student support team coordinator, the parents, the teachers, the interventionist, and an administrator. That team would then meet. They would review all the data that's been collected from the progress monitoring, from classroom assessments, from other experiences. If there are behavioral supports that are needed, we would then identify those as well and partner with parents to create a plan to support the student. If the student isn't responding to that level of plan and that more individualized approach to intervention, then the team might make a decision to refer the student for an evaluation to a 504 if there's a diagnosis that would lead to needing to support that student, or if there is a need for referral to special education, a special education evaluation. So that's the process that we have in place. So if you think back, the multi-tiered system starts in the classroom with intentional instruction, excellent teaching, with interventions that take place in the classroom for all students, with targeted interventions that identify specific gaps or knowledge areas that need to be filled in. And then if those aren't working, then a referral process for a student support team to come together to design a more individualized approach to intervention or to refer the student. I now am going to hand you over to my colleague, Tom Dobler, and he will walk us through that process and our support for students with disabilities.
Thanks so much, Heather. Could we go to the next slide, please? So I'm here tonight to share with you guys about our programs specifically for students with disabilities. All those intervention programs that Heather mentioned thus far, those things are available to any student who struggles in our school. So you need not have a student with a qualifying disability for them to access intervention. It's really, we want to make sure that we are meeting our students where they are, and whoever those students are, and helping them close whatever gaps they have so that they can access the curriculum that we have, because that's what we're here to share. Next slide, please. So I want to start with something that many of you guys probably know, which is charter schools are public schools. And so we have a legal obligation to our students and our families to serve kids with disabilities. And there's two programs. One program is the Section 504, which Heather's already mentioned. And that program offers accommodation plans for students. And then the other program that public schools are legally obligated to have in place for their students is under the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and something that in Louisiana and in Arizona, actually, we call exceptional student services or special education. I'm going to talk about these programs a little bit more in a couple of slides, but I wanted to get out front and just like make sure that it's clear that charter schools are public, and we take very seriously our obligation. And Great Hearts, as a public school, has an obligation to these students, and it's something that matters a lot to us. It's not our highest calling, though, and on the next couple of slides, I'll talk about that. So next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about the Great Hearts mission. Our core purpose really is to cultivate the hearts and minds of students through the pursuit of truth, goodness, and beauty. When you talk about an organizational mission, right? Like the mission of Great Hearts America, what are we doing with our schools? Why charter? Why public? Why are we growing and expanding? Our aim has always been, from when I joined all the way back in 2007, about democratizing this educational offering, this classical liberal arts education. We want to make sure when we say democratize, that any family who wants this education for this child has access to it. And that mission is borne out in our growth. It's borne out in the way in which we've continued to improve our intervention supports, and also the ways in which we've continued to make our Section 504 and special education programs better. I'd like to speak a little bit about access and what that means, because I feel like that's a really important word. There's a lot of ways to interpret it, and I'd like to give you, I think, the way that I think about it, and I help my school leaders and our teachers in our schools think about access for our students. So next slide, please. When it comes to access and the Great Hearts mission, it's our goal, our mission, to make sure that all of our families and their students feel welcome at our schools. That's the starting place, right? They need to feel welcome when they walk in the door, when they visit our school, when they tour, when they find out about us, through a friend or a website. But once we have our families and our students enrolled, we want them to choose to remain with us. And by remaining, we'd love our students to grow and to thrive with us and their families by extension. This is, to me and to so many at Great Hearts, what access means. And the mechanisms by which we provide that access are many. Some of them is intervention. Some of them just has to do with the people we put in our lobby, the people we choose as our school leaders. We really exist to help our families feel loved and cared for. And that means all families. It is core to our mission, not just something that we, that we're obligated to do because of a federal law or because of state requirements. This is something that matters to us because of our core purpose, which is cultivating the hearts and minds of our kids. On the next slide, I'd like to talk more about the programs and kind of give you a picture of what they look like. So Heather talked a little bit about the special education process, right? Where if a student's not succeeding or not responding, rather, not responding to the intervention systems that we have in place, there are options from there, right? The team can either recommend them for a Section 504 accommodation plan. And those plans, really, they're intended to level the playing field for our students. They provide accommodations in response to a medical condition or a learning issue, to make sure that that there is no barrier between the child and the curriculum or their classroom by virtue of that medical condition. And our teams come together and they individualize those accommodation plans based on the student needs. We don't necessarily start there at that juncture where a child hasn't responded to intervention. We can also go the other route, which is referral for special education or an evaluation. And in that process, right, because we're a Type 1 charter school and we're going to be working with the East Baton Rouge School District, at that point we'd contact East Baton Rouge pupil appraisal team and run through that evaluation process to find out if that child does have a disability, and if they do, whether they need specially designed instruction and special education services. We plan to offer, and at all of our schools in Arizona and Texas, we offer a continuum of services. So we have a wide range of students. I think, I'd like to think that our students represent, the areas where their school are. So we have students who are higher functioning. Maybe they need speech therapy or speech and language supports or some extra instruction in reading or writing or math. And we also have students with Down syndrome and students who have autism who are nonverbal, of all ages in our schools. And we've grown a lot in 20 years, a lot of understanding of how to make every child, right, able to access our curriculum, able to join their peers in this work. And in the work of learning how to be a student and thus learning how to be a lifelong learner. One thing I think that sets our programs apart, at least from the schools that I see around me in Arizona and certainly also in Texas, is that I see schools, especially our larger schools, larger district schools, that will develop a program like a behavior program or a self-contained program or a resource program, and then slot kids into those programs. And we take the approach that I think is more consistent with the IDEA, which is we start with the student and we come to understand what it is that they need. And we develop that program, that individualized education program, around the needs of the child. And so if that means, right, that they need speech therapy and maybe to be pulled out for 30 minutes a week, or 30 minutes a day even of mathematics instruction, that's what they get. If they need a teacher to push into the classroom and support them through a specific part of a lesson, right, for behavior reasons or something like that, that's what their students get. If they need an alternate curriculum for some of the day or maybe a majority of the day, that's what we'll provide. And we will find ways for those students who have the highest needs to make sure that they are engaging with their peers as much as possible, either by, sort of parallel teaching where it's necessary, which allows them to join in a conversation, or by, having a one-on-one with them in the classroom to make sure that they are following along with the class and engaging the material. So if there are questions about can we do this and can we do that, I say, yeah, we probably can, because we probably have. in our schools. So next slide, please. I want to wrap up and hand it over to Heather as well to talk a little bit about the end goal throughout all of our intervention programs and throughout our services to students with disabilities. The end is human flourishing, and Heather says it probably more beautifully than I, so I'll let her take over from here.
I don't know, Tom. I think the democratization explanation was beautiful, and it is true for who we are and what we believe. We believe each human soul is uniquely valuable, and we believe that the ultimate end of man is human flourishing. And that is why we are committed to partnering with our parents in service to our students to ensure that they are flourishing. And in the end, our aim is to graduate great-hearted young men and young women who possess a sense of destiny and purpose, directed to the service of the greater good, forming a more philosophical, just, and humane society. I think that for each of us who is a parent, to understand that that is the aim of an educational institution draws our own hearts because of our commitment and our love for our children and for the society we live within. So I want to take this time to thank you for participating in this virtual event. We're always excited to have you in these settings, as well as when we're able to join you in person. And I would love to open to any questions that you might have. And I know that Tom is just a wealth of information, as he has helped to develop our special education, our exceptional student service program in Arizona, and partnered with our colleagues in Texas to do the same. So again, thank you. And we open it up for questions.
Okay. Just looking through the chat here, and from my colleagues, I think we can start with this. It's loosely related. This not just loosely, it's directly related. How much homework is expected / sent home in the 4th grade? I think that's a great question, right? Because it's how the student grapples with that work and then presents their knowledge of it in class that can determine a little bit more what sort of supports we offer, right? I would say, having been a parent of a 4th grader a couple times, that we expect somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes of homework a night. Usually my 4th grader was done between 25 and 30 minutes, sometimes in about 35, but it was usually like this. He would come home, he would do his rocket math problem in about a minute. He would recite a poem to me, which I thought was wonderful. He would read with me for about 10 minutes or so. And then we would work on a history project or a science project. It was all very involved in a good way. And it was usually nothing he ever begrudged doing. He was always very engaged, but it's usually somewhere between 25, 30 minutes. All right. If the child does not need any type of special education services, will they still get help when needed and not be left behind? This is a wonderful question, and in many ways gets to the heart of Heather's presentation, the multi-tiered systems of support question. So thank you for bringing it up, Callie Robert. What I would say is that yes, right? We mentioned that the focus is student-centered. There's a multi-tiered system of support. It starts with excellent teaching in the classroom. But with excellent teaching comes this act of micro-noticing what gaps or obstacles are presenting themselves to students when they're engaging with the work or struggling to engage in class. So there will be tutoring services offered, and there will be intervention offered if needed. I will say that in a broad manner, and then I will also defer to Heather to talk a little bit more about support so that students who do not have an IEP or a 504 do not get left behind.
So the support, like I mentioned, is in the classroom, where, to Mr. Heisman's point, right, teachers are noticing where students are at. And the goal of any Great Hearts classroom is to engage all students. And so a teacher who is doing that will notice when a student might feel off task or might be disengaged, and work to bring that student into conversation. One of the things we do is participation. And so that's one way that students aren't left behind, because as they're participating, even if they don't know the right answer, they're still engaging, and the teacher can coach and support that student. So the desire is for all students to be engaged in learning.
Wonderful, wonderful. Tom, I'm going to defer a little bit to you. We have had students with this diagnosis before, but I'd like you to speak a little bit more technically to it. My child has been diagnosed with mixed receptive expressive language disorder. Will Great Hearts be able to accommodate her needs? Tom, I think there's an answer, and there's a couple parts to it. So I'd like you to delineate the parts.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. This is a good question, and we have had many students who have receptive expressive language disorders or delays in our schools, and I mean, without knowing your child and knowing the ins and outs of her needs, I can't fully say, but my guess is, and I would say I very confidently would say yes, we can. Looking at her IEP would be really important, or if she doesn't have an IEP, getting started on that process would be important when and if you enroll her. But it would probably look like a mix of regular speech therapy, speech and language therapy, to address some of those receptive and expressive issues. But we would want to complement that with other supports like accommodations or supplemental services that could be deployed by either a general education teacher or a special education teacher, just depending on the ways in which this disorder impacts her, right? Because a language disorder is not necessarily just about speaking. It could also be about listening. It could be about reading. It could impact the child's ability to communicate in the written word as well. And so our IEP teams should attend to the different needs of each different child. I've heard, said before, and I believe if you've met one child with a disability, then you've met, just one child with a disability. And so it's important to, if and hopefully you do enroll your child in our school, that you get in touch with our special education or our ESS team early on so that they can come to know her, right? Know what she needs and be able to plan for the kinds of services and supports that she'll need. So that's my response to that one. Do you want to, you want me to just jump to the next one?
Sure. Tom, I'll broker it real briefly here. Can you talk about how you support kids that are bright and also have a disability? For instance, a student with an IEP who tests high. His supports are more focused on executive functioning, social skills, anxiety, speech, OT, and sensory. I'm concerned that IEP services would be denied since academically he does very well. Tom, again, I'll defer to you, but what I would say, I'm a father of a student like this. I'm a father of a student with an IEP who needs executive and speech coaching. And services have never been denied to either of my children. To thrive, to flourish at a Great Hearts Academy, we want to provide every intervention, every accommodation, every service we can to help them engage emotionally, intellectually, right, and morally, right? We want them plugged in as many ways as we can. And I would argue that sometimes social skills coaching and having those non-academic interventions is some of the most important supports we can offer. But again, I'd defer to Tom here.
Yeah, Sam, I couldn't have said or led into a response more beautifully than you did. What you called attention to is the idea that in education or educational success, right, is merely academic success, and that's not true legally. It's also not true in Great Hearts' conception of education. When we think about wanting our students to be intellectually, morally, and physically virtuous, that means that we need to pay attention to all parts of a child and all ways in which they engage with their peers. And students who struggle with executive functioning are going to struggle probably with some of the parts of academics, right? Being organized and having their materials ready and knowing what's in their locker. Those kids with EF issues, you open the locker and it's an stuff, right? And we want to help them, work on those habits, just as we want to help them work on the habits of study and scholarship. I would argue that there is no great study and scholarship without the ability to plan and execute a thing. And so, any of these needs that may appear to be, sort of not academically related, they rear their heads at a Great Hearts School, because it's not just about answering questions on a test. It's not just about, giving the right answer or having the right answer when a teacher asks. It's about engaging with the ideas and the great things. I would say that Great Hearts loves the things that we study, almost as much as we love the kids we teach. And we really want our kids to love those things as well. So
that's right.
That's my response.
That question comes from Sherry, and I think Nicole, you asked a question. I would try to pronounce your last name. I'm afraid I'd butcher it. But those questions about interventions for non-academic support, please know we value that so much, and we want full human flourishing. I think Tom answered that beautifully. I think that addresses both Nicole and Sherry's question.
Sam, one thing to interject with is we're planning on having, I don't know if it's a large team or not by Baton Rouge standards, but a relatively large team of special education teachers and assistants, but also a school counselor, right, at our school to help teachers meet the needs of students who need those strategies and supports to make it through the day, feeling healthy and not feeling anxious or stressed. I think we deploy and use our related service providers, like our speech therapists, our counselors, and our special education teachers, according to their strengths, right? If a special education teacher has a particular strength in helping students with social skills, for example, then we would deploy them. But we may rely on our speech therapists or our counselors or our deans. There's lots of ways to teach kids the habits of social interaction, and we have a great deal of experience with that at our veteran schools. So we'll translate that experience to Louisiana.
Yeah, I would also add Tom as a former educator who's SPED, not a former educator, a former teacher whose SPED director was Mr. Tom Dobler. Teachers love to see students succeed in non-academic supports as well, in social emotional supports as well. Those are some of my favorite things to coach in the classroom. Some of my favorite things to coach at home with my children as well, with the Heisman children. Just wanted to add that. I think though it's anecdotal, I think it's really important to know from your school leadership that this is near and dear to our hearts. Looking back through these, there's a couple questions, Tom, about what we call wraparound services, speech therapy, ABA services. Would speech therapy sessions be in a one-on-one setting or in a group setting from, I'm sure there's another name there, from Preppy Girls?
Got it. Yeah. That depends on the needs of the students. We need to be fiscally responsible, right? And so I think one-on-one is ideal, and where it happens, a speech therapist can generally get a lot done with a student. But we also know through our own experience that speech therapists can be really effective with small groups, usually up to 3. We don't like large groups because large groups of speech therapy setting don't generally help students work on the skills. But again, I'm listening to my colleague who's a speech therapist tell me it depends on the skill, it depends on the student, and so we group where we can, unless there's a good reason not to, right? Unless a student really needs that one-on-one attention. It all comes back to are the things that we're doing for a student, be it intervention or speech therapy or social skills practice in a group or or counseling, are those things helping a child make progress, helping a child?
Very good. Oh, Tom, I think your video froze. So what I'm going to do is just shift the topic here for just a little bit. Another question comes up on that topic, we'll go back to it. But I want to shift to one that's not in the chat, but which I think might add some dimension to some of the questions we're touching on. And Tom, we had talked about this earlier. This is a question I get often in videos, not video sessions, in-person information sessions. And I'm reading it because I wrote it down here. What behavioral supports do you have in place? What behavioral supports do you have in place? I'd love to hear from, myself and Heather and Tom here. What I would say broadly is we have a multi-tiered system of support, a continuum of services that respond to different behavioral needs. I think we have some principles here. Students want to do well. They want to do well by their teachers. They want to do well by their friends. They want to do well by their leaders and administration. And there are often just unmet expectations that cause students to act out at times. And these are these expectations that we have to make clear and help them meet. Discipline is a matter of cooperation in meeting these expectations. Often it's through just giving them a quick reminder, hey, eyes up here, a quick reminder or a brief conversation after class or something more intensive with the teacher and with the administrator. But it's usually always a matter of cooperation in finding a way to meet the expectation for that particular student. That's what I would say broadly, but I think I'd like to follow that multi-tiered system of support, go to Heather, and then go to Tom about behavioral supports.
Yes. So if you think about, I think the starting point, as we've talked about, is the classroom. Consistency of expectation. We have found that is the key for all children. It doesn't matter where they're coming from, that if a teacher is consistent and they feel that it's a safe environment with the expectations being clearly defined, that students tend to, the behaviors are supported in that setting. When students have additional social emotional needs or behavioral needs, we have some philosophy or some principles that we follow. The idea that asking questions is key to learning is true about asking questions of students when they're struggling with something related to behavior or compliance. As Mr. Heisman said, children want to do well when they can. And so sitting them down with them collaboratively, asking them questions to help clarify what their needs are and to then offer solutions and partner with them and partner with parents to develop solutions for their success in the classroom or in some other aspect of the academy is important to us. So there's a collaborative approach that we have, as well as principles that we gain from a resource called Love and Logic, which helps us to once again define the right questions to ask students, and then help them develop the steps they need to address their own behavior. So it's a collaborative approach, a thoughtful approach that guides students to helping them to reflect about their own needs and their own emotion, as well as then collaborating with parents. And we know that that's an essential piece of working with our children is really that partnership with families to identify needs and to develop then systems of support. And then Tom.
Sure. Yeah. As with academic or educational progress, I would say academic because I believe behavior is a part of educational progress. If a student isn't responding to the things that the school has tried, right, intervening at the lowest level in the classroom or maybe creating a simple behavioral support plan between the teacher and the parent and the student or a contract or a variety of different ways in which schools can respond to students who struggle behaviorally. There are more formal tools that we can use. And one approach that, and I think it's saying the same thing as Heather was saying, and also the same thing as Sam was saying. We always think about behavior as the student is communicating something to us, no matter the behavior, right? They're communicating something. And if we can't figure out through these normal channels, like the normal intervening activities, at a low level, what that child is communicating, there are formal assessments and ways in which to do that. The most common one is called a functional behavioral assessment, and that's a big sort of, I don't know, kind of opaque or not really precise way of saying, figuring out what a child is communicating about what they need, and using the information from that functional behavioral assessment to develop a better behavior intervention plan, or at least maybe a more robust one that includes, more teaching of the skills that maybe a student lacks. Right? If they're communicating it, they're not communicating their needs in a way that works in our classrooms, and so we need to help them learn how to communicate about their needs in a way that does work. And that doesn't necessarily need to be exactly the same as other kids do it, but in a way that works, right? And we just proceed in the same way that we would with any other intervention, and just getting better information, having sort of longer meetings, and coming to understand the student much better about what they're communicating. So that's our approach. And we use, I saw a question about ABA therapists. We love working with ABA therapists. We have in the past welcomed outside ABA therapists. We have an obligation to provide an education at no cost to families, but that doesn't mean that we can't, use resources from the community that are available to our families and students that help us do that. So, yeah, we're familiar with all that, and we've done that. We've done that before. We just need to talk through what it looks like, and we need to talk through ensuring that the school is fulfilling their obligation at a base level, because that's what we care about.
Sure. Tom, if it's deemed that ABA is necessary, would that therapist be able to come into the school?
Yeah, if it's deemed that it's necessary, then I would think it would be something that was added to a student's IEP, and that we would contract, right? We would pay for, or otherwise find a way to make that service free to parents. There is a bottom line legally when it comes to special education, and that it's that the education that we provide is free, and that it's appropriate for those students. And so, as long as we're not violating that, we are willing to work within the needs of our families.
Very good. I'll wrap it up with this question. We got one in the chat. Is there a way to watch the previously recorded info sessions? And yes, there is. Thank you, Mr. Worley. Mr. and Mrs. Worley, I think, have both asked and left very encouraging comments. We really appreciate it. Is there a way to watch previous video sessions? Yes, if you go to our website or our YouTube page, I believe there is access. I would ask our producer, who you can't see right now, Danny, to put some instructions in the chat, if possible, on how to find those videos. I believe they are on our website and our YouTube page. But I think we are at time. So I'd like to thank you all for coming to our virtual info session over student support services. We truly believe that we want to offer access to this life-changing program, not just curriculum, but program, culture of classical education. And we are honored and to serve people like you, David, Callie, et cetera, all of you. We're very excited, Callie, that your son is excited to come to Great Hearts. We're excited to serve him as well. So as always, if you have any information, any questions, or seek any information, please email info@greatheartsharveston.org, and we will route it to the appropriate person, and we'll be reaching out to you very shortly, within 24 hours. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.